Welcome, everyone. I believe we are live, so let's get going. Welcome to today's workshop on gaining strategic instinct and adaptability. If you don't know what that means, I guarantee you will know by the end of this session. So, what are we going to be covering in the next 20 minutes with me? So, for those who don't know me, my name's Laura. I'm Director of Customer Success. I currently lead our global team supporting all of our amazing customers, some of which I know are here today, and helping them be successful with Cascade. I've been here for a couple of years now and hopefully know a little bit of something about strategy. So for the next 15 minutes or so, I am going to be introducing you to what we mean by strategic instinct and fast adaptability. And I'm going to be starting that with a brief workshop. If you've been to these sessions before, I always like to lead with what is strategy and really simplifying how you can go and execute. So hopefully you'll get some value from that. In part two, I'm going to be unveiling our platform. So those of you who've been to these before but never seen our platform, I'm going to be giving you a brief tour of our platform, and then I'll wrap up with a Q&A. So feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A, and at the end, I will cover them for you. So let's start here. What do all of these companies have in common? And I tweaked this earlier today. You've probably seen in the news a couple of stories about layoffs and companies that are not really performing recently. And I think the reason for that is they lack two superpowers. The first one, that strategic instinct, the ability to recognize an opportunity and then respond to it strategically. And the second one, fast adaptability, the ability to monitor, change, and realign or regroup or reprioritize when it finally hits. And we believe those two superpowers can get you to successful execution. And I believe those companies have really lacked. So we've got a bit more on this in a strategy report. It's called You're Doomed or You Adapt. Definitely check it out, scan the QR code, or we'll drop it in the chat, because traditional planning assumes the market is stable, and we all know the market is not stable right now. And I'm here to help you find those two superpowers for your organization. So I think when we talk about those superpowers, I think really it comes down to not having complicated jargon and not bringing in external consultants who don't understand your business. Really, it comes down to these fundamental things. They represent really that blueprint of your business. And it's not a new concept. It definitely isn't new. It's definitely not something Cascade has invented, but we believe we're mirroring that in our platform, but being really bold and really explicit. So you can bring in any framework you like when we're talking about strategy today. You can bring in Hoshin Camry or the OKR method, whatever it is that you use in your business. That's just another lens to work with. So what I'm going to distill down for you in this workshop really is how you can get from your vision and your values, that North Star that you're heading for as a business, and then breaking it down into three simple things: what you want to achieve, things that will help you achieve it, and ways that measure that impact. And that it's as simple as that. And that's really the three things that I think we can get wrong occasionally when we're working in businesses. Is we assume that people understand what this means. They understand that they can go and execute it, but sometimes it's more complicated than that. So there's a couple of wording and terminology that I'll use throughout this, and one of them is the ideal methodology. This is the new and improved way so that we think you can execute your strategy. Again, feel free to download the workbook on this and really understand where your company is operating when it comes to these 5 things. I'm actually going to be focusing on inclusion today in this workshop, how you can get your entire organization around strategy, how you can ensure collaboration with your teams, and really ensuring that everyone's day-to-day work aligns with the top-level strategy. What I'm not going to be covering too much is really how you can be more dynamic, how you can drive engagement, how you can align your teams, and then how to drive leadership. But definitely check out our content on this to drive that forward. So the first one is inclusion. We believe strategy needs to be everyone's business. It shouldn't be stuck in a boardroom. It shouldn't be stuck in a PowerPoint, and it definitely shouldn't be stuck in Excel. And it's a lot easier than you think to fix this. And really, the answer is inclusion. So stop hiding your strategy in the boardroom. It's not going to get you far, and it's certainly not going to help your teams to execute correctly. To bring everyone together, we've heard from some of the speakers so far how you can really drive that focus around execution bringing everybody into the fold. And everyone knows something about your business, whether you know about it or whether you don't, or whether it's something unique in the team that they work with, or the market insights, or something specific about the customer. And if you get your teams collaborating, that's how you can really strive for that inclusion. So have a think about a couple of these things. Does everybody in your team know the strategy that your business is working towards? Does everybody feel part of it, most importantly? And do you value their diverse points of views? So definitely think about these three things as we're going through the workshop. So let's talk about formulating your strategy first of all. When we talk about strategy execution, I think one thing to be really clear on is that you need your teams to focus on the execution and not the planning. Although we're talking about how to formulate your plan in this workshop, it's definitely thinking about how your teams are actually going to execute and then actually see results. So we like to break it down into these 5 areas. The first one is your plan, your grand strategic plan that is living in PowerPoint or living in Excel, and then breaking it down into your key focus areas. And we heard a moment ago from David, they can often be called pillars. Sometimes they're called priorities, strategic priorities, themes is another one as well. Think about those areas of focus for your business, and I'll touch on in a moment how you can think about creating those. And then you want to break it down to objectives. So these are really those things that you want to achieve as an outcome. They're those big, bold, really clear, really concise messaging that everybody in your business can rally around. And then I think the simplest way is to break them down into actions and then measures. And this is how you gain that strategic instinct and adaptability, because it's really, really clear what you're striving for. Now, although I'm talking about actions and measures, actions can sometimes be referred to as projects or initiatives, whatever that word is that you use internally. Make sure everybody is aligned with that messaging, make sure everybody's speaking the same language, and make sure you're not causing a bit of confusion by using lots of different versions. And the second one is measures, the one that most people are familiar with, often interchanged with KPIs or metrics or key results or indicators. I actually did a quick Google earlier to see what other words I can come up with, and I found an article that had at least 18 listed. So make sure you're really, really clear on what your terminology is inside your business so that everybody can focus on the execution. So let's talk about these in a bit more detail. So what makes a good focus area? These are really going to be the foundation stones of your strategy. It expands on your vision. So if you want to be the #1 bike manufacturer in the world, then how are you actually going to focus that? Maybe it's through aggressive growth, maybe it's through recruiting the top talent, but they need to be easy to remember so that people can focus. You don't want it to be longer than 6 words, and the clue really is in making that easy to remember. If they're longer than 6 words, people are going to lose the focus. So you don't want it too broad, you don't want any jargon, and you definitely don't want any metrics. So a really good example, aggressive growth. When you then break down those focus areas into objectives, these are really those high-level statements that describe a specific outcome. And the trap that I've seen time and time again is having a focus area that has 20 or 30 objectives. You can't bring clarity to your teams on what you're really trying to achieve if you have too much to go after. So make sure that there's between 3 to 6, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on your business, and they have a deadline attached. So even if it's for the whole year, or even if it's just for the whole quarter, you definitely want to have a deadline for when you want to achieve that by. Secondly, you want it to be tangibly achieved. So you want it to be linked to the organizational identity. There's no point of having an objective that is completely unobtainable. You want to make sure that you're still going to be able to achieve it, and it is linked to the culture and the identity of your organization. And they should be attached to focus areas. That's really where you bring that clarity. And you don't want to have them aligned with multiple focus areas because that's going to add even more confusion. And again, don't have metrics or KPIs or indicators in here. That's going to come later. So a really good example would be triple our revenue across key segments. Now, we're not saying we want to make our revenue 150 mil. We're saying we want to triple it. So it's really clear. We want to triple our revenue, and we want to triple it across key segments, and we want it to be by the end of the year. Really clear. And then you want to break that down into actions. So this is what you'll actually do to achieve your objectives. And this is where your team will be operating today. Most likely, this is where the execution happens. So you want to be really specific with how you get there. Don't list the operational things like keeping the lights on, etc. But you can then break them down later on into those short checklist items or maybe project milestones as well. And quite simply, they'll be done or they won't be. So a really good example is creating a large-scale marketing campaign. Again, we want to be specific with the date. And lastly is what makes a good measure. So this is something that you want to be quantitative, you want it to be time-bound, you want to define that success that links up to your objectives. And together they really act as that scorecard for your company health. They'll help you identify when to make adjustments. They'll help you to really keep the pulse on what are the trends in the market. And because they're measurable, you'll be able to see whether you're trending in the right direction or the wrong direction and be able to adapt and be agile in your organization. So an example of this will be increased revenue to 65 million by the end of the year, super, super clear, and then you can rally your teams around that. All right, so key takeaways on part one, and then we'll get into the Cascade demo. So it all starts with inclusion, in my opinion. You want everyone in your business to know and understand your priorities, and most importantly, feel part of the journey. You want to reduce the time it's taking everyone to get on the same page, keeping your plans visible. And there's a great tool out there somewhere for that, which I'll show you in a moment. And then you want to use the opportunity to educate. So don't assume that your teams understand what objectives and projects and measures are. I've been working in strategy for a couple of years now, but prior to that, I didn't know the difference between them and I really couldn't wrap my head around it. So don't assume that everybody understands the terminology, and be agile with your planning. Stop making these grand plans, stop getting paralyzed by that perfection, stop building out your plans for months on end. Get something built, get it into draft, rally everyone around it, and tweak and be agile as you go along. So let's get into Cascade, hopefully the reason why you're here today. So Cascade is really a new way to work. Cascade is not another tool to add into your stack, but rather sits in the heart of your organization. So you may have data all over the place, most likely. You may have outcomes, different outcomes you want to achieve across the business. You may have complicated frameworks, and maybe you might have a strategic structure that everybody understands. And maybe you're already holding meetings about strategy or about how your teams are working. And probably, most likely, you're reporting in some way or another. But really, Cascade brings an intention. It helps your teams be focused. It helps you be more strategic. And most importantly, helps your team be aligned with both your vision and your mission, but with each other as well. Most importantly, it brings that context. So although you might be operating all of these different things in different places, Cascade helps bring that together, and we think is the glue towards strategy execution. So really, we're going to help know what's important to your organization, how your individuals can contribute, and it lives alongside those key goals, helping you to deliver more with less. And I did mention a moment ago, we support all different structures and framework. As complicated as you want to go, you can bring that into Cascade as well. But I think most importantly and fundamentally, where I really see Cascade fitting into any size organization is that you may already be running meetings. Most likely you're already running your reporting, but Cascade is going to help you to enrich and show how you're working towards those goals and help bring that alignment. So let's take a look. So today I'm going to act as Emily. Emily is VP of Operations for Meerkat Cycling. They're a 1,000-employee company, and they've been using Cascade for a few months now to drive their strategy forward. So Emily receives a report in her inbox by Jacob. Jacob has sent her this supply chain update for the month, and she wants to go in and see how the team are performing. So she opens up Cascade. She sees this supply chain report. It has an executive summary. It shows her the budget allocation and how they're performing towards their metrics. Now, Emily needs to chat with Jacob, so she has a bit of back and forth. Thanks, Jacob, for all the hard work. And then she digs in to edit this report before she sends it off to the board. So she's in Cascade, she's editing this report, and she just wants to make a few small tweaks before she goes on and shares it. And then finally, she shares it with John, and she wants to carry on with the rest of her day. So I'm actually going to show you what Emily sees on a day-to-day. So this is Cascade. Emily jumps in. She wants to get a bit more context on those goals. So immediately Emily can see the latest updates from the team. She can click in and understand a bit more about what's going on. She can also see how she's performing against her goals. So she can immediately see that we have a couple of at-risk goals here as well. But Emily wants to dig into the detail. So she heads over to her operations plan. We'll give that a moment to load. So she's going to dig in, and what she wants to understand now is really where the teams are at risk, what goals are really causing these problems across the team. So she digs in, she can see those key focus areas, as we touched on a moment ago. She can see her objectives, and then she can drill in and understand the measures and also the actions of how the team are performing. And she can immediately go in and start speaking to a team here. Perhaps she wants to drop Jacob a note or John a note and ask where they're up to on that. So really driving that collaboration. Secondly, she wants to understand how the teams are performing and how they are all aligning together. So she drops into the alignment page here. And this is really where Emily can start to understand how far the teams are in terms of their alignment to each other. So a really good example here that I'm going to touch on, and I'm actually going to collapse these to show you. So we've got our Meerkat corporate strategy. We know that the health of this plan is not tracking too well. We have a couple of objectives at risk here, 7 of them specifically. She can drill in and take a look. But as well as that, she can also drill into how the teams are aligning to this. So we can see, for example, the finance team not performing too well in terms of the health, and also only a quarter of the things that the finance team are working on actually align up to that strategy. So this gives her that real insight into being able to be agile with what the finance team are working on, giving that strategic instinct and adaptability that we want to strive for. She can now drill into this plan and start to understand what they're working on and how it contributes to the strategy. And lastly, I want to touch on the focus area that we talked about a moment ago. One of the real key things around making sure your teams are focused is the ability to make sure that teams are working on the right things. So one of my favorite parts of the platform is in here. We know that distribution and delivery is at risk, as most companies are right now with the current climate. We want to dig into that and really understand why. So let's go in, let's explore and see what's going on in this focus area. Now, if you have multiple teams that are working on this, so for example, something like distribution, you've got operations, you have supply chain, you have production and manufacturing, but where are the problems actually occurring? So we can drill in here and we can see this is at risk. Let's understand why. It's something to do with distributors. It's also to do with delivery performance. And Emily automatically has the knowledge that she needs to go and give that attention. So hopefully that is a glimpse into Cascade. I'd love to show you more, but I believe we're running out of time. So I am going to flip over to the Q&A now. Feel free to ask me anything about the platform or about how to formulate strategy. Also feel free to give Cascade a try. It's really, really easy to build out your plans and really drives that focus of your team. Or if you want to know more, feel free to book a demo with us. So I'm going to come out of share mode and see what questions you've got for me. So the first one is, strategy needs to be everyone's business, or really strategy execution needs to be everyone's business? Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question. I think not only does the execution need to be everyone's business, but people also need to contribute to the planning of that. So one of my favorite things is when companies really get their organization behind what they're setting out to achieve, because leaders don't have all of the answers. You really need your team to bring in those ideas as well. So strategy needs to be everyone's business. Most importantly, execution does as well. Any tips to avoid over planning? My last org would often get stuck here. Yeah, really, really great one, Jamie. This is something I see time and time again. We want to create these big plans. We want to get them perfect, and we're scared about actually moving into the execution phase because we're not quite there yet. So I think my biggest tip would be get some objectives down. So normally I recommend to people, if they're just starting in planning, get a couple of focus areas, start with 4, build out a couple of objectives in each one, and then get your team operating, get them using it, get them building on it, and learn from it quickly. The other thing that I would add to it is talk about it as often as you can. So whether it's a weekly meeting or a bi-weekly, depending on how fast your business moves, get people talking about it. And that's how you'll start to formulate and build on that plan over time. And really get away from those planning cycles. So if you're planning in January, you're not reviewing it again until the following year. Get out of those planning cycles and start talking about it more frequently. Hopefully that helps, but we have some really great articles on planning as well if you want to dig into that a bit more. What do you see as the minimum size of organization Cascade would work in and add value? Great question. Honestly, I have worked from companies of 1 or 2 people all the way up to tens of thousands. I personally use Cascade for a little side project I have. It's just me, and I use it to really help focus my work and give that attention that it needs. And it's just me. So it's adding a lot of value in terms of making sure that I'm, keeping on track with what I'm working with. But honestly, it's going to add value in any size of org. So feel free to give it a try. I think we've got time for one more. Does the tool integrate with any other work management tools such as Jira for measuring actions? Yes, absolutely. Great question to land on. We have lots of integrations. Jira is one we launched recently. So if you've got teams such as product and engineering in a tool like Jira, you can absolutely bring that context into Cascade. Then Cascade becomes that heart of the organization. You have data coming from platforms over here. You've got your actions measurements coming from Jira, and then you can raise it up a notch and see how you're performing towards your vision. So yeah, give us a shout on live chat if you want to know more about how that works. Thank you all. Hope that was useful. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. Bye-bye.